Well, this was a weekend of upsets. First it was the Kentucky Derby, then it was a Bivol's decision victory over Canelo. I'm not surprised that Bivol won. He's a damn good fighter, but I am surprised at how decisively he was able to do it. I had a high opinion of Bivol until I saw his fight against Craig Richards last May. Bivol won a close decision in that one, but I thought if Richards had pressed the action a bit more, he could have defeated Bivol. So I think maybe Canelo's people saw the same vulnerability in Bivol and decided to take their shot. Canelo looked fatigued really early on and unfocused, and maybe those six busty women in the front row were placed there to distract him. Who knows? But I thought the fight was won for Bivol by the fifth round when he had Alvarez on the ropes, and he just lets loose with this volley of 1-2s. And Canelo was forced to cover up, and he waved Bivol back in, kind of taunting him. And Bivol didn't fall back into Canelo's frame. He just patiently waited him out and evaded Canelo's follow-up blows. And after that sequence, I thought Canelo's body language was of someone who had just lost total confidence in himself. And, in hindsight, I think the fight was lost for him mentally at that juncture. So a lot of folks are talking about Canelo being too small for the light heavyweight division, having slow feet, not being able to handle fighters with mobility. Maybe all that is true, but I think Canelo's primary weakness is that it appears to me he has a front runner's mentality. When things don't go his way, I think he goes back to a default of just laying on the ropes, and like he did against Triple G in their first fight. And when he can't impose his will on his opponent, he goes into this passive mode, and he just doesn't throw that many punches. When he realized that Bivol was a different animal, a part of him looked like he just gave up. Bivol had a steel will, and he never got rattled by Canelo's early power shots. Their size differences notwithstanding, Bivol was the better technician. And sometimes you don't know that until they get into the ring. So we saw a masterclass of scientific boxing at Canelo's expense. And this will be one of those fights that will be interesting to watch again. But I don't see how a rematch, they're talking about a rematch already. I think it's scheduled for September. And I don't see how a rematch can play out any different. Bivol's style and technique look to be made to order to defeat Canelo. So this week from the archive, I wanted to look back at a 1980s light heavyweight in Gerry the Bull Martin. Now, Martin is a classic example of how there are levels in boxing. He was a top-rated light heavyweight who can defeat just about anyone aside from the champions. He challenged for the title on three different occasions. He came up short against Eddie Mustafa Muhammad, Matthew Saad Muhammad, and Dwight Muhammad Qawi. But he was able to defeat the likes of Jesse Burnett, Billy Douglas, Rick Jester, and he ended the undefeated run of James Scott, which was his biggest victory.
I understand nobody wants to fight Gerry the Bull locally. He's just too strong.
You're looking at a tight shot of Ivy Brown out of Kansas City, Missouri. A little bit over the limit. Here's Ed Darian.
This next bout is scheduled for 8 rounds. The judges for this bout, Tommy Cross and Harold Letterman. In the ring at this time, referee Hank Cisco. In the corner to my right, wearing the red trunks with the white stripes, weighing in at 182 pounds, here is Ivy Brown, Kansas City, Missouri.
There's his record, 14 wins, 4 losses, 5 knockouts.
In the corner to my left, wearing the all red trunks from North Philadelphia, here is Gerry the Bull Martin.
Third man in the ring will be our good friend Hank Cisco, who is a Montgomery County detective stationed up in the Norristown area, where we have a lot of viewers tonight as we take a nice tight shot of Gerry the Bull Martin.
Gerry the Bull is slapped together, isn't he, Huey?
Boy, he's really a piece of work. A little over the weight limit at 175, Martin at 183, and Ivy Brown at 182. Round one of the scheduled 8-rounder.
Gerry Martin won't want to stay out there very long. He's the type that likes to get in and get the business. Martin showing a nice active jab there.
Oh, what a right! Did he make Ivy Brown blink, Jack? Really stung him with that one.
He did that. He came right over the top, following the left. Now he's going to get a little more respect for the rest of this round. Very cool, too.
What a
Good
combination.
right hand to the body. That's a good jab that he has for a fellow with 10 fights. Ivy Brown is giving him that shot all night, or all around.
Trying to set him up with that left jab and right hook as he did there.
Ivy Brown's been around. He knows where to keep that left hand.
Brown's been around, in fact, in pretty good shape as well. He's won his last 6 fights, his mark 14-4. Personally, I think he'll be hard-pressed to win here. Although he did get a good hook in.
Gerry the Bull's not a bad counterpuncher. Continues to stalk. Ivy Brown is going to discover that you cannot trade. You cannot trade when you're in there with a guy who is clearly the better puncher.
But he's scoring at will.
That's that right hand uppercut shows that Gerry Martin is well schooled. When you have a man who goes down in the crouch like that for defensive purpose, the only answer is the uppercut, uppercut. Then when you bring him up, you can come across the top of the hook like he did just then.
That's exactly what he did. Got a quick jab in, just punching away.
Well, he's a worker. This is what I call industry. There's another right hand over the top.
Missed with that right cross and walking right into it. It's Ivy Brown, another left.
That left hook was a little bit low, but I know it was unintentional.
Ivy Brown against the ropes. Gerry Martin. Nice short uppercuts.
Martin keeps himself pretty tightly pulled up.
Oh, I think Ivy Brown's in trouble.
I think you're right. I think Hank Cisco crossed right in front of us at the time of a critical punch.
Still able to punch off the ropes. Gerry Martin trying to score and end this thing.
They're just mauling on the inside, but this gives Ivy Brown a little bit of a rest. People don't realize it, but if you're a practiced enough fighter, you can save yourself by getting inside.
Oh, nothing but shots.
That was that right hand over the top that did it there.
No question about this, but Ivy Brown is about ready to cave.
The amount of time left, this may not finish. Hank Cisco is looking very carefully at Ivy Brown.
Got 45 seconds to go in round number 3. Got nothing but blood all over our table here as well.
Yes. Throwing punches. See?
I'm not sure if
Keeps buzzing.
Ivy Brown didn't score there, but Jerry Martin with that hook.
Every time he gets off a punch, he's sparing himself being hit by a heavier hand. Now he got hit by that heavier hand. The right hand got him in trouble.
Really in
Left hook
trouble.
was glancing, following it. Hank Cisco hasn't had to break up.
Oh, solid.
There's that right hand.
Oh, that struck Ivy Brown.
He got his left hand up before the second right came in. It's safer, but much more tired.
Jack, he's got about 5 straight jabs in a row, and now we find Brown covering up for almost every punch that Jerry Martin wants to set up.
I'm surprised that Ivy Brown is laying out there like that. That's where he's been hurt, lying on the outside. Now Martin's going to work on him on the inside. Get him pinned on the ropes. Ivy Brown does some cute things on the inside. There, he goes outside and gets hit by the right hand again and again.
That's
over.
Hank Cisco stepping in, and you may have heard the crowd behind us saying stop the fight as a TKO here at the 110 mark of round 5.
So a couple of questions for the mailbag this week. This one's from Jay Jones. What did you think of the undisputed super middleweight Durzun versus Cederroos? Could you shed some light on your breakdown of the fight? Well, it was bloody and sloppy. I'm more into women's MMA than women's boxing. I only reviewed the Katie Taylor-Amanda Serrano fight because it did have some historical significance. And those fighters have merit. They're in a pretty competitive division. Durzun and Cederroos were fighting for the undisputed super middleweight title in a division that, according to BoxRec, there are only 24 women competing worldwide in this weight class. And you look at the ratings, the majority of the women competing here have less than 2 fights of professional experience. Durzun has only had 9 fights since 2016, and Cederroos has only 8 fights since 2017. I respect the heart and the moxie of these women, but they're both in their mid to late 30s. So, and you look at the landscape that they're competing in, there is no future for them in the sport. There's literally no one for them to fight. Again, women's boxing has to take a page from women's MMA. In order for the women's boxing to break out, it's going to need a star that has ability and sex appeal. So women's boxing needs a breakout star like a Ronda Rousey or, even a Paige Van Zandt, someone who can build a huge following and generate interest in the sport and not only generate box office, but get other women into competing and, making an undisputed championship actually mean something. And it doesn't mean anything when there's only 24 women competing. Looking across the landscape of women's boxing, we have Michaela Mayer. Maybe she can be that star, but she's going to need a dance partner. There's La Bonita Fernandez, who I like. She has the look, but she has the language barrier, and she needs to get on a bigger platform. One star to look for in the future is Skye Nicholson. She's already being showcased by DAZN, and she may be the breakout star that women's boxing has needed since forever. Next question from Daphne Russell. What would you consider Triple G's signature win so far? Well, that's a good question. I don't think Triple G has ever had a signature win on his resume. Not in the same way that Hagler and Sugar Ray had Hearns as their signature win. Triple G does have a legacy, which, it's secure with his accumulative wins over time. The one victory of his that stands out to me, the one in which I knew he would be an historical fighter, is when he took out Australia's Daniel Geale. I thought Geale was a solid, really solid and good technician, and Triple G just smoked him. And that was in 2014. The lack of competition at middleweight wasn't his fault, but I'm with some of the Triple G critics in that I think he needed to move up in weight. He never fought Andre Ward, and he never sought out that signature win. aside from the Canelo fights, and those were disputed decisions. I definitely think he lost the rematch. But Triple G needed to move up to super middleweight at some point and pursued the challenge in the same way Canelo moved up to challenge him. Next question from Shadow Snake 89. What's your opinion on the 1960s, 70s knockout puncher Mac Foster? I personally have had a hard time gauging him as there are only 2 of his fights to view. Well, back when I must have been like 11 or 12 years old, and I was looking through the old boxing magazines, and I came upon Mac Foster's story. And I saw that at one point he was 24-0 with all knockouts. So I remember I asked my dad if he ever heard of him. And he said, oh yeah, he was a paper tiger. So whenever I hear the label paper tiger, when somebody describes a sports team or a fighter, I think of Mac Foster. Yeah, he did look the part of a knockout artist with that Fu Manchu mustache. And in looking at his films, he was physically strong, but he was really stiff-legged. And he barely bent his right knee, barely bent his right leg in his fighting stance. And he was a really slow counterpuncher, and that was a kiss of death when he moved up in class. And I rewatched the bout with Ali just to refamiliarize myself with him, and I got the impression that Ali was carrying him. And apparently Foster was a nice guy in real life, so I suspect maybe Ali took it easy on him on purpose, or considering the fight was in Tokyo, I think Ali wanted to entertain the Japanese fans just a little bit more, but I got the impression that Ali could have taken him out at any time he wanted to. So, yeah, I think Foster rose as far as he could in the game, and he got that glossy record with some favorable matchmaking. So thanks for the views and comments on the Jeff Sims and Gerry Cooney videos. A lot of if only he had a good manager and trainer comments on Jeff Sims. My take is a bit different. If he needed a mentor, and he needed it when he was really young, like before he hit his teenage years. But he was exciting to watch. His style was raw, and it was just like watching an unpolished street fighter, and he had huge power in that right hand. Ernie Shavers definitely got the benefit of the long count in the first round of that fight. As far as the Gerry Cooney video goes, I was never a fan of Gerry Cooney when I was a kid because he beat up Jimmy Young, and Young was one of my dad's favorites, so I kind of followed my dad's lead. But now as an adult, I can see how unfairly he was criticized throughout his career. He was criticized for beating up old men. Young was past his best, but he was still capable. And there were people who, at the time, I was reading some of the news articles, there were some writers and critics who thought Norton would beat him. And Norton was still in the top 10 before he met Cooney. So, some of the writers of that time period were, people thought the media hyped Cooney. Well, not the boxing media. Most of the boxing writers really hated Cooney. And some of their insults got really ugly. And now, you look back in hindsight, knowing Cooney's abusive background and how his father's treatment of him really sabotaged him psychologically. So you could see how much courage Cooney really had. Cooney was a fighter. So that's it for this week. Let me know if you have any questions for next week's mailbag, and I'll see you then. Thanks for listening.